Have you ever felt frustrated with your husband because of the way he does things, the way he responds, the habits that he has, or simply because he seems to see things differently from you? Maybe you feel like you are constantly trying to get him to understand your perspective, change a certain habit, or do things the way you think they should be done. But what if the thing that could bring you freedom from your frustration isn't what you think it is? And what if there is a way to experience freedom from the frustration you feel towards your husband without giving up hope that God can still work in his heart and bring change where change is needed? Welcome to our Peaceful Heart podcast. I am Julie, a wife and mom who have had my fair share of emotional, overwhelmed moments in my home, feeling anxious, tired, and sometimes just irritable. But once I started seeking God constantly in the overwhelm, I began to experience unshakable peace. And that's what this podcast is about. Learning to surrender our thoughts, our emotions, our overwhelm in everyday moments to God so we can walk in the peace He promises to those who seek Him. So grab something warm to sip on, settle in your favorite spot, and let's lean into Jesus and learn to walk in His peace right in your home, starting from this episode. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share a beautiful review that was recently left on the podcast by Peaceful Sleep with Jesus. She wrote, "Phew! Julie drops gem after gem in this podcast. She invites us to stop striving and instead surrender our concerns and burdens to God, allowing Him to transform us. This conversation was rich. Thank you, Julie, for showing us the beautiful pathway from overwhelm to peace." And thank you so much for taking the time to write this review. I genuinely love reading your reviews, and your review also helps other wives and moms discover this podcast. So, if you've been listening to Her Peaceful Heart and have never left a review, I would really love if you would take just a moment to do that. Even just a few sentences can help this podcast reach another wife who may need to hear these conversations. I truly would appreciate it. Now, today's episode is all about something that I think every wife will experience at some point in the marriage: frustration with your husband. And I want to begin by saying something that I think is so important for us to understand. The people who can hurt us the most are often the people we care about the most. Somebody cannot deeply disappoint you if you have no expectations of them. Somebody cannot deeply hurt you if you do not care about them. And so, because you love your husband, because you have given so much of yourself to your marriage, because you live in such close proximity to your husband, you are going to experience moments where you feel frustrated with him. You are living together. You are sharing a home, a marriage, finances, responsibilities, children, decisions, routines, and everyday life. And both of you are completely unique individuals. You have been raised differently. You have different personalities. You have different habits. You have different ways of doing things. There are things you do because you learned them from your family growing up. And there are things you do simply because over time you have found a way that works for you. And the same goes for your husband. He has been raised differently from you. He has different habits. He has a different personality. He has different preferences. And he has his own way of thinking and doing things. And because of this, you are going to clash. Even if you love each other, you are still two completely different people who have become one in marriage. And so today, I want to talk about how we deal with frustration towards our husbands without losing hope. I want to share what genuinely helped me and still do every single day. And this is, I have learned to accept my husband for who he is and the way he does things, which means I want you to accept your husband for who he is. Now, when I say that, I want to be very clear about what I mean, because I think the word acceptance can sometimes make us feel afraid. We can hear accept your husband for who he is and think, but does that mean I have to accept everything? Does that mean he can never change? Does that mean I have to stop hoping for anything different, or that I'm stuck with my husband for the rest of the life with the way that he is? And the answer is no. That is not what I mean. Accepting your husband does not mean that you ignore serious problems. It does not mean that you never have honest conversations, and it certainly does not mean that you stop praying. It does not mean that you stop hoping that God will continue to work in his life and continue to change him. So what acceptance means is that you stop fighting reality. You stop constantly living in your mind in the place of, he should not be like this. He should think differently. He should be a better leader by now. He should know by now what to do. We can have those thoughts. And when we constantly refuse to accept something that is currently true, we create an incredible amount of frustration within ourselves. I want to give you an example from my own marriage, but before I do, if you are feeling that you are constantly overwhelmed, you keep snapping or feeling irritable with your husband or your kids, and you don't want to feel that way, but you also don't know how to break free from it, what if you could understand where your emotional overwhelm is actually coming from? Why you keep getting stuck in the same patterns, and what you can begin doing differently so that you can start experiencing more of God's peace in your everyday life. I created a free mini transformation workshop that will help you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface and give you practical steps that you can begin applying immediately in your life to break free from irritability, frustration, and overwhelm. I walk you through why overwhelm keeps repeating itself, how to begin taking your thoughts captive, how to make time with God even when life is busy, and how to prepare yourself for the situations that so often cause you to lose your peace, to be snappy and irritable. So if you want to move from emotional overwhelm to a peaceful, spirit-led life, I would love for you to join me. The mini transformation workshop is completely free, and the link you can find in the description of the show notes of this episode, or you can go to www.elevatedwife.com. Now, let me give you an example from my own marriage. My husband is an introvert, and I am also an introvert, but my capacity for people is greater than he is. I can spend a whole day with people, have conversations, enjoy myself, and come home to feeling like I could probably still talk to somebody. My husband, on the other hand, can enjoy people, but his capacity is much smaller than mine. We could visit with friends, and after a couple of hours, he would say, "Okay, I think we should go home now." And this used to frustrate me so much because I wasn't ready to go home. I would still want to talk. I would still feel like I had more capacity to spend time with these people. And I would think, why do we have to leave now? Why do we always have to leave when he is ready to leave? What about me? What if I wanted to stay longer? I would get so frustrated. I would feel like we were always doing things according to his capacity, and I would start to feel like my desires were not being considered. See how it starts with being frustrated with one thing, and we start to feed those thoughts of being frustrated, and it accumulates. And we just spiral down, and eventually we become selfish. Like, if I have to backtrack and look at myself, I can see the selfishness inside of me of still wanting to stay longer, even though my husband had no capacity. And so with this, I came to realize that this is simply who my husband is. He does not have the same capacity for people that I have. That does not mean he is wrong, and it does not mean that I am wrong. It simply means that we are different. And when I truly accepted that, that part of him, something changed inside of me. I stopped fighting against the fact that my husband was different from me. I stopped thinking he should be able to stay longer because I want to stay longer. My heart towards him truly changed. So when we would visit people and he would say, okay, we can go home now, I would simply say, okay, and go home and truly feel at peace in my heart. I would have no frustration towards him. Now, I want to be honest. Did I still sometimes wish that we could stay longer? Of course. But I no longer had that same frustration and bitterness building inside of me because I had accepted him. I now understood him. Once you begin to accept your husband, it truly opens another door of releasing any bitterness and offense within your heart. And it also opens the door to understanding the other person better. So I realized that he was not taking something away from me, as I actually thought and feeded myself this lie of we are only doing what he wants to do. He was simply reaching the limit of his capacity. And instead of constantly trying to change him into somebody who could enjoy people the way that I do, I learned to accept that this is the way he is. And I can truly and honestly say this, that acceptance brings freedom. Once I started living in acceptance towards my husband, I experienced and still experience so much freedom. When you stop fighting against something that is outside of your control, you suddenly have so much more peace. A lot of our frustration comes from trying to control something that we cannot control. Frustration often happens when reality does not match what we want. We want our husbands to do something differently, but he doesn't. We want him to respond differently, but he doesn't. We want him to have different habits, different preferences, or a different way of doing things. And because reality does not match what we want, we become frustrated. But when we accept the reality of who our husband is, we release ourselves from the exhausting responsibility of trying to control him. And I know control is a very hard word to use, and people will immediately think, but I don't want to control my husband. I am not controlling my husband. But frustration is genuinely a symptom of the root, which is control. So maybe your husband is very different from you in the way that he keeps the house. Maybe you like things done immediately and he is more relaxed about things. Maybe you like to plan everything in advance and he is more spontaneous. Maybe you like to talk through every detail and he does not. This is me. I want to talk through every detail. My husband, straightforward, just one sentence and the conversation is finished. Maybe you process your emotions out loud and he needs time to think before he speaks. Maybe you are very social and he is not. Maybe you are very particular about certain things and he simply does not notice them. And when we live in a constant state in our minds of why is he like this, we can become so frustrated with the person that we have married. But what if, instead of constantly wishing for change, we begin asking, how can I understand and accept that God created my husband as a unique person? Now, I want to say something very important, so listen closely. Acceptance does not mean that your husband cannot change. You can accept your husband for who he is today and still have hope for what God can do in his life tomorrow. These two things are not opposites. You can say, this is who my husband is right now, and I'm not going to spend my life trying to control him through being frustrated in the way that he does things, while also saying, Lord, I trust that you are working in his heart, and I'm going to continue to pray for him. I'm going to continue to pray for the change that I want to see in my husband. Because ultimately, when we are married and we love each other, we want the best for each other. I cannot think a spouse wouldn't want the best for the other person. So when you pray from a place of you want the best for your husband, that is an honest prayer. And because you live so closely with your husband, you can see his flaws and his weaknesses, which means you can pray to the Lord to change them and to strengthen him in his weaknesses. My husband is not perfect, and neither am I. There have been many things that I have prayed about over the years, and I have seen the Lord bring change. So one of the ways that I love to pray is, Lord, my husband is your son before he is my husband. You love him more than I ever could. You know what is best for him better than I do. Please work within his heart. Please show him what you want for him. Please help him become the man you have called him to be. But in the same sense, I would also specifically pray for the change that I want in my husband. However, I do this from a place of a heart posture of love. Because sometimes we pray for our husbands from a place of, Lord, please change him because I'm tired of dealing with him. Okay, that used to be me. I think we've all been there. But what if we begin praying, and I want to encourage you to begin praying, Lord, you love him, you created him, you know him better than I do. Please work in his heart and help him grow closer to you. I see this thing in his life. I'm asking for change if it's in your will. If not, please change my perspective of it. A lot of times, that is my prayer. So always be open to the Lord changing you too, because whenever change needs to happen, it's usually not just one person. It's usually both of you. Which also brings me to another important thing, which is not every frustration needs to become a conversation with your husband. Sometimes we need to talk about things. Sometimes there are real issues in a marriage that need honest and loving communication. Sometimes your husband genuinely does not realize how something is affecting you. Sometimes there is a problem that needs to be addressed. Sometimes you need to have difficult conversations. But other times we are frustrated because our husbands is simply different from us. And those things may not need a conversation every time. They just maybe need surrender. This is where your relationship with the Lord becomes so important, because you can pray, Lord, this thing is frustrating me. Is this something I need to speak to my husband about, or is this something I need to lay at your feet? And then you allow the Lord to lead you. Psalm 32 verse 8 says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. This has become one of my favorite scriptures lately because God is able to guide you. Sometimes you may feel the prompting of the Holy Spirit to speak. Sometimes you may feel convicted that you are nitpicking, controlling, or trying to change something that is not actually sinful, but simply different from the way you would do it. And sometimes the Lord may show you that you need to have a real conversation. But whatever the answer is, the answer will come from having a relationship with the Lord. And the Lord will either prompt you, tell you directly to speak to your husband about it, or he will tell you to surrender it to him. So the first step is still learning to accept that your husband is not you. And that is okay. Marriage is not about finding someone who is exactly like you. It is about learning to love another person who is different from you. That is unconditional love. And sometimes that difference is exactly where the Lord wants to grow you, which is actually so beautiful. Because if your husband is different from you, it may require you to become more patient. It may require you to become more understanding. It may require you to surrender control. It may require you to stop assuming that your way is the only right way. And that is where the freedom begins. The freedom is found when you stop making your peace dependent on whether or not your husband changes. Because if your peace depends on your husband changing, then you are basically giving your peace away. Peace is not found in change. It is not found in circumstances. It is not even found in emotion. It comes from God and is found in God. The faith in action step is when you start praying, Lord, I trust you with my husband. I trust you with my marriage. I trust you with the things that frustrate me. I trust you. And that does not mean that you should stop praying for change. In fact, I believe that acceptance can actually make our prayers more powerful because we are no longer praying from frustration or bitterness. Like I said, we are praying from a place of trust and hope. You can accept your husband and still believe that the Lord is working in his life, but you do not have to live in constant frustration while you wait for him to become different. So maybe today there is something specific about your husband that you want him to change and that you need to release to the Lord. I am sure you maybe thought of one thing or a couple of things. So maybe you need to accept that he does things differently from you. Maybe you need to accept that he has different strength, or maybe even accept his weaknesses. Think about that thing and say, Lord, I'm going to accept my husband for who he is today while still trusting you with who he is becoming. If today's episode made you realize that you don't want to keep living in a cycle of frustration and emotional overwhelm, don't forget that I have a free mini transformation workshop that you can watch. The link is in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to www.elevatedwife.com. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I truly hope this episode encouraged your heart and pointed you back to Jesus. If this conversation blessed you, I would love for you to share it with another wife or mom who needs this encouragement today. And if you haven't already, I'd love for you to follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And then one last favor, if you don't mind, I want to ask you to leave a review because it truly helps this podcast reach more wives who are feeling overwhelmed and need this kind of encouragement. And it's also the only way for me to get to know you. So please leave that review. And remember, you don't have to carry it all. You just need to learn how to surrender it all. I'll see you in the next episode.